If you are working in any kind of complex environment, and I mean, who isn't these days, you've felt that friction, that feeling where your whole organization just seems to be grinding to a halt. It's paralyzed by its own internal processes, endless review cycles.
Arbitrary review cycles a lot of the time.
Exactly. It's that moment where you realize the bureaucracy itself has become the primary threat to your own velocity.
And that feeling, that specific friction, is precisely the focus of the source material we're diving into today.
Right.
We're tackling the challenges of modern complexity, but through a very specific lens. We're looking at large, high-stakes organizations that are operating in, rapidly evolving geopolitical arenas. Think about the European security theater.
Place where speed is everything.
Everything. And what this white paper, which is titled Coalition Towards the Bazaar, reveals is, well, it's genuinely surprising.
It really is, because most of us, I think, would assume that in these high-stakes environments, the greatest threat to your decision cycle is some external capability, what the adversary can do.
Their technology, their speed.
Yeah. But the authors here, and these are people who developed this work for major military commands, we're talking about USAREF and LANDCOM.
So just to clarify for everyone, that's the U.S. Army, Europe and Africa Command, and NATO's Allied Land Command. These are not small shops.
Not at all. And what they pinpoint as the fundamental issue is that the greatest threat is actually internal process.
It's us.
It's us. The way traditional military staffs, and by extension, any large corporate staff build their plans, is fundamentally broken when speed is the decisive advantage.
It's an issue of institutional rigidity clashing with operational necessity. They argue pretty forcefully that the traditional methods of planning are they're just too slow. They can't cope with the pace of change.
Which is why the paper is so revolutionary. It's not suggesting a small tweak. It's advocating for a wholesale transformation.
A total mindset shift. They're urging these, very rigid hierarchical structures to basically abandon their old methodology and adopt principles from a completely seemingly unrelated world.
The world of technology, specifically open source software, OSS.
Exactly. You're talking about borrowing the very concepts that built the internet, that built the Linux operating system.
Ideas like radical transparency, rapid iteration, decentralized contribution, all these things that sound like they belong in Silicon Valley, not a military command center.
And they're very, very clear on one point, which I think is crucial to state up front. This is not about collecting data. This isn't open source intelligence or OSINT. This is purely about process transformation.
Right. It's about how you build a plan, how you coordinate a massive multinational effort, and maybe most importantly, how you distribute trust and responsibility across the entire network.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission for you, the learner, is to really dissect these OSS principles. We want to understand how concepts that are usually reserved for software developers can be adapted to make any complex planning group, whether that's military, corporate, or governmental, faster, more adaptive, and ultimately way more resilient.
We're really looking at the playbook for how you turn a vertical, slow-moving hierarchy into an adaptive, transparent network.
And to really grasp the sheer magnitude of the shift that's required, we have to start where the paper starts, with the foundational analogy.
The one from technologist Eric S. Raymond.
That's the one. The dichotomy of the cathedral versus the bazaar. This is the core conceptual lens for this entire discussion. Once you get this, everything else clicks into place.
We have to define these because as soon as you hear them, I guarantee you'll start realizing exactly where your own organization falls. So let's start with the cathedral because, well, that's the default setting for almost every large legacy organization out there.
The cathedral model represents that traditional proprietary approach to creation. It doesn't matter if it's software or, in this case, a complex operational plan. The key words are closed, secretive, and highly centralized.
I'm picturing, a medieval cathedral. It's being built over decades, maybe even centuries.
Exactly. And who's building it? It's a small, isolated group of high priests, the master architect and his handful of select apprentices.
The experts.
The experts. And in a modern planning context, these are your senior planners, your senior developers who are working behind closed doors, often in complete isolation from the people who will actually have to execute the plan. And they're aiming for one thing.
The grand reveal.
One single, perfect, flawless grand release.
It's the ultimate expression of the waterfall method, isn't it? You spend months, maybe years on development, keeping everything proprietary, top secret, hoping that when the big reveal finally comes, it is 100% complete and absolutely perfect.
And this is where the structural danger lies. The paper drives this point home again and again.
What's the danger?
The catastrophic failure point is inherent in the design. It's baked in from day one. If that single architect or that small, isolated group of experts makes one wrong foundational assumption early in the process,
Like miscalculating the load-bearing capacity of the soil?
or, in a modern context, misjudging the future political climate, or a key logistical constraint, the entire structure becomes vulnerable. And the worst part is, the flaw isn't discovered until the whole thing is unveiled.
And by then, it's too late. The cost of correction is astronomical.
If correction is even possible, think about a massive corporate product launch that completely fails because the isolated design teams fundamentally misunderstood what the core market wanted 6 months ago. That's a cathedral failure.
Okay, so you contrast that rigidity, that brittleness, with the open source methodology, the Bazaar model.
Right, and the Bazaar is epitomized by software like Linux. It's the polar opposite. Development is radically transparent. It happens in public view for everyone to see.
So the code, or in our context, the plan or the organizational directive,
Is released incredibly early and very, very frequently, often in a state that is obviously incomplete or imperfect, and this completely flips the reliance structure on its head.
So instead of relying on one genius architect behind a wall, the process leverages the collective intelligence of a vast, transparent network. How does that possibly translate to speed? It sounds chaotic.
It sounds chaotic, but it's actually hyper-efficient because errors or bugs in the software world, they get spotted almost instantly.
Because you have thousands of eyeballs on it.
Thousands of users, or in a staff context, all the subordinate units and the cross-functional teams, they are looking at that plan at every single stage. They're challenging assumptions, they're proposing fixes in real time. The improvements are, in effect, crowdsourced, they're decentralized, and they're continuous.
So you're not waiting for a formal review cycle. The review is constant.
It is. And what's fascinating here is the entire process just moves at a pace that an isolated, single genius team, the Cathedral, could never, ever hope to match. The mindset shift here is from waiting for perfect top-down compliance to embracing rapid, visible, bottom-up adaptation.
That immediately lands us on the core strategic imperative of this whole white paper, which is built squarely on Raymond's primary software axiom: release early, release often.
That's the mantra.
That's a mandatory trade-off, isn't it? The organization has to sacrifice the internal comfort of perceived perfection for external velocity.
In these high-stakes, rapidly changing theaters, velocity is the only real competitive advantage you have. And the source points out this really deeply ingrained cultural problem within traditional staffs.
Which is?
Operational planning teams, or OPTs, they are culturally and professionally incentivized to withhold a product. It could be a logistics plan, an intelligence assessment, a new directive, until they reach what they perceive as a 95 or 100% standard of internal satisfaction.
It's institutional perfectionism. I see this all the time. It's the planning equivalent of endlessly editing the final paragraph of a document while the deadline for execution is already passed.
Right. And that obsession with a flawless finished product creates dangerous, often unacceptable latency, especially when the theater of operations is shifting hour by hour.
So by the time that perfect product is finally released from the cathedral,
The operating conditions have changed, the plan is already irrelevant, or, even worse, it's dangerously outdated because it's based on assumptions and data that are now 2 days old.
this has to be a highly relatable challenge for the learner in basically any field. I mean, if you're a lawyer, how often does your firm's obsession with a perfect draft of a motion prevent a timely filing and you lose the initiative?
Or if you're in tech, how often does the desire for a flawless 1.0 release delay your market entry, allowing a faster, maybe less perfect competitor to gain all the traction?
The Bazaar approach forces you to value momentum over polish
Ah.
every single time.
So how do you operationalize that? How do you actually create a beta mindset in an environment where orders are, traditionally treated as sacred and immutable?
That's the million-dollar question.
The practical mechanism the paper proposes is something called iterative planning. It's the core practice. Staffs must embrace releasing imperfect early products. They have to get comfortable issuing what the military calls fragords, fragmentary orders, and they have to be willing to issue them rapidly, sometimes several times a day if that's what the situation demands.
Okay, we need to slow down on that term for a second because that's a really critical piece of jargon here.
Right.
What is a fragord, practically speaking, and how is it different from a complete, 100-page operational order.
A full operational order, or OPOR order, is exactly that. It's a meticulously detailed, maybe 100-page document that covers every possible aspect, from logistics to communications to the specific execution phase of an operation. It's the Cathedral's masterpiece.
It's the perfect plan.
It's the perfect plan. A free gourd, or fragmentary order, is essentially version 0.5 of that. It's a quick, concise update. It could be a preliminary instruction based on a key new assumption, or a single piece of recent intelligence that changes things.
So it's not the whole plan.
Not at all. It's designed to provide just enough information to keep the subordinate units moving in the right direction. It's an instruction that says, okay, this is the new intent. Start these 3 actions immediately. More detailed instruction will follow.
So you are deliberately, consciously sending out what you know is a C solution.
Yes.
This is where I have to introduce some friction, because my first thought is, doesn't releasing known flawed or incomplete orders just erode trust in senior leadership? Won't it cause mass confusion down the chain of command?
That is the core cultural barrier, and the sources address it head-on. The argument is that if the release is transparent about its own imperfections and it's understood to be iterative, it actually builds trust over time.
How so?
Because the staff isn't hiding the uncertainty. They're not pretending to have perfect knowledge in a chaotic environment. The organizational benefit of releasing that early, imperfect product is that it allows the process of dissent, negotiation, and assumption challenging to begin immediately.
So you're saying the execution units, the people who actually have to put boots on the ground or trucks on the road, they get to stress test the plan with their real-world expertise right now, not 2 days from now.
Exactly. The flaws in the plan are fixed continuously and collaboratively because you've publicly invited the field to challenge the assumptions early. Instead of assumptions being these protected secrets of the high-level planners in the Cathedral,
They become public variables.
they become public variables in the Bazaar that have to withstand a really rigorous peer review. And that peer review is immediate, and it's highly localized to the people who know the ground truth.
And the most tangible advantage of all this, as you noted, is you are buying time.
You're buying immense amounts of time. By releasing that C solution right now, your subordinate units, let's say they're tasked with preparing complex logistics routes across 3 allied nations, they can begin their own parallel planning cycles immediately.
They don't have to wait for the final, perfectly formatted document to land on their desk 2 days late.
No. They get the intent, they get the initial critical steps, and they start moving their resources and their own sub-planning teams. They start making phone calls, booking rail cars, coordinating with border officials. They're already in motion.
This really feels like a leadership mandate then. The leaders are making a conscious, deliberate decision to trade the organizational cost of the comfort of total control, that deep-seated desire to micromanage every detail until every comma is perfect, for the operational advantage of speed.
Speed is the ultimate force multiplier in this view, but it demands, and this is a key point, psychological courage from the commanders.
They have to be okay with looking imperfect.
They have to be comfortable with the visible imperfection of their initial planning products. They have to trust that the early feedback from the network will ultimately lead to a plan that is significantly more robust and battle-tested than one they could have ever designed in isolation.
Because that latency, that time spent striving for the last 5% of perfection, that's the critical resource the adversary is counting on you to waste.
Exactly. The enemy's plan relies on your bureaucracy.
So we've established this necessity for speed and early release, but that immediately creates the management challenge we touched on earlier. If everyone is contributing early and often, how do you prevent the Bazaar from just devolving into sheer chaos? The source material addresses this by putting a heavy emphasis on interoperability and automation.
This moves us into the realm of distributed intelligence and really the wisdom of Linus Torvalds, the creator of Linux. His idea is often summarized as Linus's law.
Given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow.
Right. The theory is that if the planning product, the code, is public and visible to everyone, errors just seem to vanish faster than any single dedicated quality assurance team could ever hope to find them.
But the challenge in a traditional large-scale staff is that certain people actively create bottlenecks that prevent those eyeballs from seeing the product. And the paper has a great term for this, highlighting the phenomenon of the iron majors.
The iron major phenomenon. This is a cultural illness that absolutely kills velocity. These are your mid-level managers or planners who become obsessed with the formatting of the output rather than the immediate conveyance of the operational meaning of the input.
We've all worked with this person.
Everyone has. They will spend hours crafting the perfect font choice for the mission statement slide. They'll adjust the graphic alignment of the timeline down to the pixel. They'll ensure the slide border is precisely the right shade of official-looking gray.
They're prioritizing the cosmetic veneer of the Cathedral's product over the immediate transmission of critical operational data. They create this artificial bottleneck because they operate under the illusion that presentation equals competence.
And they mistake complexity for importance. The Bazaar approach demands that you fight this instinct with technology. You have to use automation and dynamic, real-time tools to combat this, to effectively democratize input.
And the paper provides a really specific case study of this kind of automation in action, the Maven Smart System case study.
Right. Let's spend some time on Maven because it's a great practical example. Maven is described as an integrated data aggregation and display system. Think of it as the central hub for real-time operational truth.
So what's it pulling in?
Everything. Imagine it pulling in logistics, manifests from a port, real-time fuel consumption rates from forward units, the latest intelligence assessments on adversarial movements, weather patterns, even medical casualty reports from different field hospitals. All of it is aggregated dynamically in one place.
It makes the data live rather than static in a spreadsheet that's already out of date.
Exactly. So if a key bridge is destroyed by an enemy strike, or a primary supply route is suddenly compromised by a landslide, that data is instantly reflected in Maven, and it's visible across every functional directorate simultaneously. The logistics team sees it at the same moment the operations team does.
There's no information lag.
Zero lag. But the paper cautions, and this is critical, that simply having the tool isn't enough. You can't just buy the software. They stress a crucial rule for adoption. It has to be cold turkey.
Cold turkey, meaning you can't run the old system and new system in parallel. You just have to switch.
Precisely. Because if you give planners the option to cling to the old, comfortable, manual, PowerPoint-centric process, the one that allows the iron majors to obsess over formatting, they will inevitably do so. It's human nature. They do it to maintain their comfort zone and their perceived importance.
So cold turkey adoption means immediately bypassing, defunding, and literally decommissioning the outdated processes that facilitate that obsession with presentation.
You force them onto the new, transparent, real-time platform. You take away the old toys.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the ultimate expression of that cold turkey rule is the cultural policy change the sources call the ugly product mandate. This is genuinely provocative stuff.
It is. This mandate acts as the cultural firewall that protects velocity. Leaders at the highest level must actively ban the translation or the beautification of raw, real-time Maven data into polished products. Specifically, they have to ban PowerPoint slides.
So the human staff's role is not to format the data anymore.
No. Their job is to immediately analyze the raw data, make a decision based on it, and communicate that decision. Full stop. The formatting is irrelevant.
The implication for the organizational culture is immense. I mean, you're forcing the entire organization to value content over the container. But this requires a tremendous amount of political courage from the top leadership.
Oh, absolutely.
You're essentially telling high-ranking officers, or in a corporate setting, senior vice presidents, that they have to sit through a critical briefing looking at a raw, maybe even a messy dashboard instead of a perfectly manicured artistic slide deck that someone's aide spent 48 hours creating.
Absolutely. And the source emphasizes that top cover must be provided for the staffs who do this. If any staff member is penalized, even subtly with a dismissive comment or a bad performance review, for a lack of visual polish on their briefing,
The whole culture reverts.
the culture reverts instantly back to the Cathedral model. Everyone goes back to making pretty slides to protect their careers. So senior leadership has to champion the principle. The validity and the timeliness of the input is paramount. If the raw data input from Maven is valid and instantaneous, the final cosmetic output is secondary, because the crucial decisions have already been made based on the raw, ugly truth.
It's a brutal mechanism, but you can see how effective it is. By stripping away the ability to polish the data, Maven and the ugly product mandate strip away those artificial barriers of presentation. You're forcing the collective intelligence of the network to focus solely on identifying and solving the operational puzzles.
Linus's law can finally take hold because now staff time is spent solving actual problems, not manipulating graphic design software.
It ensures planners are engaging with the operational reality, not with some perception management layer.
Right. If your job is to analyze the logistics data and you're spending half your day just drawing arrows on a slide, you are failing the Bazaar mandate. Your job is to be looking at the raw Maven output and flagging that broken supply chain immediately so something can be done about it. The mandate forces that immediate crucial focus.
So we've got speed from release early, release often, and we have transparency and automation from the ugly product mandate. But for any of this to work, these changes fundamentally require a shift in how teams and departments actually interact with each other. You have to move away from those vertical silos.
And this transformation is anchored in another one of those great software principles. Good programmers know what to write. Great ones know what to rewrite.
Rewrite. That speaks to iterative improvement and critically public accountability.
Right. The necessity to rewrite, to constantly iterate and refactor the plan, requires the entire process to be visible to everyone involved. The traditional staff challenge the paper identifies is that those vertical silos are, frankly, where incompetence goes to hide.
Can you expand on that? How does a silo hide incompetence?
Well, if the intelligence directorate operates in total isolation and the logistics department never sees their raw product until the last minute, that intelligence team can produce low-quality, non-interoperable work that's full of unstated assumptions. It can be easily masked inside their own little kingdom.
And the problem is only exposed when
When the two silos are forced to clash at the moment of execution. When the trucks start rolling and discover the intelligence about the bridge capacity was 3 weeks old and completely wrong, by then it's too late.
So the solution proposed is to operationalize cross-functional teams, CFTs. You break down the silo walls.
You break them down completely. These teams are made up of members from all the different functions: ops, intel, logistics, comms, medical, and they are strictly and publicly accountable for their outputs. And those outputs are visible to the entire planning organization, the entire bazaar.
And this visibility requires, as the paper says, a complete redefinition of what it means to be a leader.
Yes. Commanders and directorate heads are recast. They are not merely managers who oversee their internal departmental budgets and schedules. They become stewards of their function.
That's a really important distinction in wording. What does being a steward of the sustainment function mean in practice compared to just being the logistics manager?
It means they are now personally responsible for the seamless, continuous, and transparent integration of their specific warfighting function, be it maneuver, sustainment, or communications, into the broader public bazaar network.
So their success is no longer measured by the quality of their own internal silo product, which they can polish endlessly in private.
No. Their success is now measured by the effectiveness of their contribution to the collective, publicly visible plan, and, most importantly, to the network's overall velocity.
So if the communications plan is lagging, or if the medical readiness data isn't feeding into the Maven system correctly, the steward of that function is publicly visible as the bottleneck, not just internally accountable to a single supervisor.
The transparency is the governance. The bazaar doesn't wait for a quarterly review to flag dysfunction. It flags it in real time for everyone to see.
This leads directly to this really intense organizational dynamic that the paper refers to as the pressure filter.
It's a high-pressure environment, no doubt about it, because individual and functional performance is now transparent and visible to the entire CFT and the broader planning network. The environment becomes a filter. But crucially, it filters for competence.
That sounds incredibly intense culturally. If I'm an analyst and my work, my raw input, is immediately visible to the operational commanders and the frontline planners who are relying on it, the stakes are raised considerably. So how does this filter work socially?
Well, those who are not capable or whose inputs consistently introduce bugs or errors into the larger planning system, they are identified, and they're identified rapidly. As the source states, they are effectively weeded out.
Does weeded out mean fired?
Not necessarily, and not immediately. Think of it less as a formal dismissal and more as a severe and rapid loss of institutional trust and influence. If your team's data is chronically non-compliant or always late or just plain wrong, the rest of the network will learn to route its critical decision-making processes around you. You become irrelevant.
So if you're the one holding up the fray gourd because you insist on perfecting the title slide, you lose credibility across the entire organization overnight.
Instantly. It becomes a pure, performance-based meritocracy of trust.
Your influence is directly tied to your contribution.
Exactly. The network establishes its own de facto hierarchy, and it's based on your proven ability to solve problems, to share data openly, and to contribute valuable, timely, and compliant inputs. It doesn't rely solely on your rank, your seniority, or your traditional position on an org chart.
This is how the Bazaar successfully modernizes a rigid hierarchy. It doesn't eliminate it, but it makes it flatter, more transparent, and inherently performance-driven.
The dynamic shifts the entire focus from managing a static hierarchy to fostering a dynamic meritocracy where competence is instantly verifiable through contribution.
This is a massive shift. It completely changes who has power in the organization. It's not necessarily the person with the most stars on their shoulder or the highest corporate title anymore.
It's the people with the data and the willingness to share it.
Okay, so moving fast and being transparent is only valuable if you're actually maintaining strategic direction. The final critical step in operationalizing this Bazaar model is ensuring the staff applies the correct cognitive logic to the problems they face.
Yes, and this requires distinguishing sharply between two very different categories of problems. Tame problems, which are complicated, and wicked problems, which are complex.
And this distinction is non-negotiable for maximizing staff effort.
Absolutely. The paper stresses that if you misapply your effort, say, you treat a tame problem like it's a wicked one, you just waste time, you overthink it, and you paralyze the system.
And the other way around.
That's even worse. If you treat a truly wicked problem like it's a tame one, you guarantee a catastrophic failure because you're trying to apply a pre-baked, simple solution to an entirely novel and shifting challenge.
Let's start with the tame, or the complicated problems. What defines them? What are some examples?
Tame problems are the organizational knowns. They have clear, repeatable solution paths and very definable stopping points. They are, for the most part, the predictable administrative friction of any large organization.
Like compliance checks.
Compliance checks, standard logistics calculations, resource allocation based on known doctrine or company policy. The source material estimates that the sheer volume of these tame problems consumes an estimated 80% of a traditional staff's time and energy.
80%. If 80% of your highly trained staff's time is spent on administrative friction, that explains the slow, grinding pace of the Cathedral.
It's the root cause. And the solution, then, is to treat these tame problems as the operating system of the force. You don't do them manually.
You automate them.
You automate them completely. The paper proposes using what it calls logic maps to achieve this. You essentially encode all your regulations, your standard operating procedures, your business rules into automated Boolean logic. Simple IF, A&D, or statements.
Can you give us a concrete example of what a logic map would automate in this context?
Sure. Think about the process of moving troops and equipment across multiple international borders in Europe. This is an incredibly complicated task, but it is ultimately tame. It's knowable.
Okay.
A traditional staff might spend days, even weeks, manually checking 30 different national agreements, NATO protocols, customs forms, environmental regulations for each country. A logic map automates this entire process.
So it's a series of checks.
Exactly. The system just runs the logic. If the unit is traveling on route X, A&D, the lead vehicle's weight exceeds Y tons, and D, the destination is country Z, then the required permits are A, B, and C, and the notification must be sent to these three offices. The system instantly runs that compliance check, and it flags any exceptions, instead of a major spending 3 days on the phone trying to gather signatures.
That's fascinating. It means the system handles all the known variables instantly, ensuring that the baseline data going into any plan is perfectly compliant and instantaneous. This has to free up just an enormous amount of cognitive capacity.
The profound impact here is the shift in the human's role. Instead of staff members manually pushing data around and acting as the human calculator, that's the scenario where man eyes the loop, the staff is now providing strategic oversight.
They become the man on the loop.
Exactly. The human brain is now reserved to focus solely on the unknowns and the novel variables because that 80% of known administrative friction is now being handled by the automated operating system. The staff is elevated from being a processing layer to being a true management and decision-making layer.
And that massive efficiency gain automating all the team work allows those high-performing cross-functional teams to direct their full energy toward the wicked problems.
Which is where they should have been focused all along.
So what defines a wicked problem in this operational context?
Wicked problems are the truly complex issues. They have no clear stopping rule. There's no done. And attempting to implement a solution often changes the nature of the problem itself.
They're dynamic.
They're dynamic, they're shifting, and they are highly influenced by unpredictable external factors. Think about new adversarial capabilities that suddenly appear, or unexpected political shifts in an allied country, or a catastrophic environmental event like a flood that wipes out your primary port.
You can't write a simple rule for those.
No. They require continuous iteration and dynamic visualization. You can't use static spreadsheets or pre-programmed solutions for wicked problems.
So wicked problems demand a forward-looking navigational approach to assessment, not just a backward-looking report card.
Absolutely. The assessment process has to use dynamic rubrics that are developed on the fly, based on the current context, the established doctrine, and allied norms. And to visualize this complexity for senior leaders, the paper proposes a simple but incredibly powerful monitoring tool, the commander's dashboard.
And this dashboard synthesizes 3 cross-reference metrics to predict the future route, providing real navigational insight instead of just historical data.
It's a GPS, not a rearview mirror.
Okay, let's break down the 3 metrics on this dashboard because I think they offer a universal way to measure organizational health in any complex project. First up, the tachometer.
The tachometer measures the weight of effort. It's the organizational RPMs. It tells the commander, very simply, how hard the staff is working.
So if the needle is high, in the red zone,
The staff is burning a lot of energy, they're busy. But the diagnostic question here is crucial. Are we redlining on low-value tasks? A high tachometer reading, when it's divorced from the other metrics, might simply suggest impending staff burnout. It often means they're still manually tackling tame problems that should have been automated.
okay, so that's effort. Next, we have the speedometer.
The speedometer measures the actual tempo, the operational speed, or the throughput. And this is judged by measuring the clearance rate of critical and essential tasks. These are the specific tasks that fundamentally move the operational plan forward. This metric is your organizational velocity.
And this is where you can spot problems. If the tachometer is high, but the speedometer is low,
You have a massive efficiency problem. The staff is intensely busy, they're working late, they're running around. Perhaps they're obsessing over formatting ugly products, but they aren't actually accomplishing the key tasks that matter.
they're running hard on a treadmill.
That's a perfect analogy. All effort, no forward movement.
And finally, you have the ultimate reality check, the odometer.
The odometer measures progress, the actual distance traveled toward the strategic objective. This is the ultimate feedback loop against the plan's original intent. It answers the one fundamental question that matters. Are we making actual headway in the theater? Or is all this effort and activity just maintenance?
This metric is the reality principle. It's measuring outcomes, not just activity. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, the real power of this dashboard system isn't in seeing one of those dials in isolation. It's in the synthesis, right?
Exactly. By cross-referencing, say, a sky-high RPM reading on the tachometer with a near-zero tempo on the speedometer and a barely moving odometer, the commander gains immediate predictive insight into where the planning process is failing, and they see it before the operation stalls completely.
They're no longer waiting for a verbose summary report that details what went wrong last week.
No, they are watching a real-time predictive model of organizational dysfunction and operational stagnation. It's the difference between navigating a massive military coalition with a static paper map and navigating with a real-time GPS feed that shows you the traffic jams, the road closures, and whether your current fuel consumption actually aligns with reaching your destination.
It allows for proactive course corrections, or maybe staff refocusing right in the heat of the decision cycle.
The assessment tool is transformed from a historical review into a genuine navigational aid.
And crucially, because all the tame problems have been automated, when the commander sees a high tachometer, they know that energy is likely being spent inefficiently on the remaining wicked problems. It allows them to intervene with very targeted guidance rather than just walking in and telling people to work harder.
Right. They can ask, why are we stuck on this specific wicked problem? Do we need different expertise? Is our core assumption flawed? It's a much more productive conversation.
So what does this all mean? When we put it all together, we began this deep dive with the rigid, the isolating, the slow Cathedral, which was driven by a deep-seated fear of imperfection.
And we have transformed that piece by piece into the transparent, the rapidly iterating, the high-pressure Bazaar, which is driven by a total commitment to speed and performance visibility.
The core transformation that's summarized by the source material is that this bizarre dynamic doesn't just manage the existing hierarchy. It fundamentally modernizes it by making it flatter, radically more visible, and built entirely on trust derived from verifiable public performance.
And it requires a completely new form of leadership, one that willingly, even eagerly, embraces visible imperfection, releasing those C solutions for the sake of achieving unparalleled speed.
It also fundamentally redefines the concept of failure, doesn't it? They are institutionally embracing the risk of failing fast because the feedback loop is so immediate and collective. It allows for instant bug fixes.
And that risk profile is exponentially better than the Cathedral's risk profile. The Cathedral attempts to avoid failure entirely, only to risk collapsing catastrophically years later when its single hidden flaw is finally discovered.
The final goal, then, of adopting all these open source principles from the ugly product mandate to the commander's dashboard is to build a staff culture that is not just robust, not just capable of surviving a shock.
But one that is fundamentally anti-fragile.
Explain that.
An anti-fragile structure is one that doesn't just endure volatility and disorder. It actively uses the chaos of a rapidly changing theater as fuel for rapid continuous iteration. It ensures the organization actually thrives on uncertainty rather than being paralyzed by it.
The mandate is clear. Stop building cathedrals of isolated, perfect planning and start hosting a highly visible, meritocratic bazaar of collective solutions.
It's a powerful, powerful argument for decentralized contribution, for radical transparency, and for how those factors can allow you to outpace even the most sophisticated, centrally planned, closed adversary.
And that focus on institutional perfectionism is really the thing we need to take away. So here's our final thought for you, the learner. If a non-military organization, let's say a massive engineering firm building a new power grid, or a national nonprofit that's developing a major housing policy, if they adopted the ugly product mandate, and they fully committed to releasing C solutions to their internal and external stakeholders early and often, what is the single greatest internal cultural barrier they would have to overcome to make that shift successful?
And to build on that, how would successfully applying that distinction between tame and wicked problems, really automating that 80% of administrative friction, how would that fundamentally shift their organizational velocity and their capacity for true innovation?
Think about where your own professional time is truly being spent. Are you optimizing the known, or are you solving the unknown?
A question that applies to every single sector that's struggling to keep pace with modern complexity.
Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.